How many folks do you have on the Zoom call today? Do you know?
Yeah, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, great.
We'll take
Okay.
it. All right, so
Yeah.
let's start with the setup.
Sure.
Oh,
So, just want to start off with the most important part of getting ready to paint your house or your room is making sure you have all the right stuff before you do it. So we want to sequence a room by painting ceilings, trim, and walls. So you don't need to actually go out and buy all of it at one time if you don't plan on doing it all at one time. But if you intend on doing it all at one time, there are some things you're going to need. You're going to obviously need to pick out the paint that you want. You're going to need a 9-inch roller pan. You're going to need a 9-inch cover. We like to use either a 1/2 inch or 3/8 snap on our roller 9-inch handles. We also like to use liners. So we'll use, I don't know if everyone can see us here, but we have a liner here. So I can use multiple colors and not have to clean out the tray. I can just throw away the liner. Also, we use liners for our paint pot. We only need one paint pot, but we have multiple liners that are less money than a paint pot that we can put the different colors in, and then at the end of the day, we can just throw it away. I have labeled everything. I like to be, when you start off, if you have similar colors, you might have a white ceiling, you might have a slightly white off wall like we're going to have today, then you might want to label your liner if you intend on doing everything in one day so you don't mix up the paints. So you've got your roller handle, you got your tray, you got your liner, you've got your pot, you've got your whiz roller cover. The one thing that we did not put on the list is these are little tray holders for your brush. I mean, for your roller to be able to get the excess paint off. You put this in your pot. A lot of what we're going to do today is going to require both brush and whiz roller. This will speed up the process of painting your room. Because at the end of the day, when as a homeowner tackling a project on a room, you don't want to get bogged down on it. You don't want to have to worry about it taking one phase, taking all day to do it, depending on the size of the room. Then we have our roller pole. This roller pole is fine for most houses. It's just a little 2 to 4 foot roller extension pole that we can put on the end of a whiz roller or a 9-inch roller. They do make easy, quick connect ones, but for the most part, they're all basically the same. So if you can get a 2 to 4 foot extension, and that works out fine. Brushes, you want to do yourself a favor. A lot of people think that I'm only going to paint one room, so I can buy an inexpensive paintbrush. You'll be kind of shocked at the cost of the materials alone when it comes to painting a room, but go out and spend yourself some good money on a paintbrush. Take care of it, clean it, wash it out, and then you'll have it forever. And it will really make the difference between a good experience and a bad one. You're going to want a rag, a wet rag. I'd get a nice damp wet rag before you start the project and keep that wet rag on you. The other essentials are a roll of plastic. This is what we would use if we had furniture in the room. We would put the furniture to the middle of the room, and we would take clean, fresh plastic and drape it over the furniture, and then tape the plastic to the floor. That way, when you're moving around, if you've got this wet rag that happened to be in your pocket after wiping something, and you went by that furniture and you swiped it, if the plastic had been lifted up for some reason, you're going to get paint on the fabric.
Types of brushes?
Yes, which will not come out. The type of brushes that you guys are going to want to use, all of you are going to be using latex paint. So you're going to want to buy a nylon polyester brush. You can either get an angled brush or a straight brush. I would suggest an angled brush because it's going to be able to perform all the things you need out of one brush. Getting back to the tape that you're going to be required, I suggest the yellow tape. There's green, yellow, and blue. Yellow has the least amount of tack. Therefore, if you're going to paint your walls in your trim within, let's say, 2 days apart, that trim paint, as you'll see as we go on, the trim paint will be very fresh. And we want you to use tape. Professionals use tape. We don't want you to tape everything, but we want you to tape the most important things to make your room look like a professional did it. And then that means we're going to be putting tape on our trim after it's painted. And we want to make sure when we pull our tape off that it doesn't pull the paint with it. So therefore, we want to use the yellow tape, which has got the least amount of tack. But still, it's called frog tape. And the frog tape will not it'll allow the paint to not creep underneath the tape. Often you'll see people that will try to use masking tape, or they'll use a different type of paint and they put it on and they think they've done a great job and they paint, and then they pull the tape and they go, oh my gosh, look at all this paint that's creeped underneath the tape. That's because they used the wrong type of tape. So we're going to use a frog tape and we're going to use the yellow. I suggest to have a caulking gun and a nice tube of, this happens to be from Sherwin-Williams. It's just their 950A white latex acrylic caulking. It'll dry to paint in about an hour. Sandpaper. You should always start off with sandpaper. You don't need a real heavy grit sandpaper if it's just a residential interior room. Here we're using 120. And 120 should be able to satisfy all of our sanding needs. And then last, you'll need a putty knife, or a great tool is a 5-in-1. They call it a 5-in-1 because it can do multiple things. The round part can clean off a roller. We don't use that anymore. We used to use it a lot. We'd shave off the paint and try to save a roller. It's got a very pointy end for digging out or puncturing. It's got an end for like a screwdriver. You can scrape with it. It's got multiple uses. The putty knife is strictly for spackling the wall. You can spackle the wall with a 5-in-1 as well. So it's strictly up to you if you want to purchase both or just get one. We'll use the spackling for the walls and wood filler for the trim. Most often, if the house has been painted before, you won't require wood filler. So that being said, that's the materials that's involved. I've kind of speeded up the process. The only other thing that you're going to require is a ladder. Most residential ceilings are less than 8 feet. So you could use a smaller step ladder like this if you feel comfortable with not having a lot of support in front of you. If you don't feel comfortable with a lot of support in front of you, you'd want to use a regular 6-foot ladder to get you close. Now you have a lot of support around you. So it all depends on where you feel a comfort zone on going up a ladder. That being said, I'm going to use a small ladder because I think it'll be easier for everyone to see me. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sequence a room. Sequencing of a room is we want to paint from the top down. We want to paint the ceilings first, then we want to paint the trim, and then we want to paint the walls. The sequencing can certainly, if you were trying to do multiple coats in one day, you would want to try to get, you could mix that up. You could do ceiling, walls, and then trim. But ultimately, I would suggest that everyone tries to do this ceiling at one stage and then move to your trim. At the end of the day, it's only paint. So if you shouldn't be have any anxiety about getting something mixed up. The one thing I will tell you is when you put a drop cloth down, if everyone can see this, I will promise you, the one place that you do not have your drop cloth, like this corner of the room, that will be the place where the paint will land. So I would suggest that you put the drop cloth out and cover the whole room. The first thing we're going to do today is I'm going to show you a couple secrets on ceiling painting. The first thing we want to do is you pour your paint into your ceiling pot and you take your whiz roller, you get it into the paint. Now we're not going to use a paintbrush on our ceiling because we're going to paint our walls. So we don't care if we get paint on our walls. And I would recommend 2 coats on everything, but it's not necessary. So I've got plenty of paint on my roller now. I don't want to have to go up on my step ladder now. I don't need to. What I need to do is grab my extension pole, attach it to my whiz roller, go back into my paint, and now I'm going to cut in my ceiling. As you can see, all I have to do is roll my ceiling. You'll get quite a bit out of one dip. I just got about 8 feet. I'm going to do a little bit more. I'm getting plenty of that ceiling paint. It's getting on the walls, but I don't really care because I'm going to be painting the walls. So there, I'm cutting in. I don't even have to be on a ladder. I would suggest,
Sheldon, what size nap is on that whiz roller?
these are little 1/4-inch whiz roller naps.
Okay,
So you can go to any paint store and you can get a whole setup already. You can get the roller, the handle, and the whiz roller on it, or you can buy a whiz roller and buy a package of individual covers that will slide right on the extension pole. I mean, right on the handle.
thank you.
So now that our ceiling has been completely cut in all the way around, now I'm going to roll my ceiling. So we haven't used a brush yet. We haven't had to. You haven't had to fight with going up ladders. Well, the same thing now with our rolling our ceiling. I'm going to attach my roll pole to my 9-inch handle. I'm going to get my, one secret you guys can learn from these roller covers is to dampen the roller cover with, go to the sink, take your hand, get it wet, and get that roller cover wet to take off any naps that may be on the roller cover so it doesn't come off onto the surface that you're painting. After you've done that, you want to make sure that you get plenty of paint on your cover. And now we're going to roll the ceiling. When we roll the ceiling, we want to make sure that we never start off right next to the wall, because that's where we're going to have the most paint on our roller cover, and we're going to leave a big fat wet edge of paint. So we want to start at least one length of roller away from the wall. We want to roll, there's a couple different ways we're going to teach you to roll, but one is I want you to roll with the wall, right here. Just get the paint off of that. Whoop, see that? A little on my face. And then we're gonna move in closer to the wall, to our cutting line. I'm gonna stay about 2 inches away from the wall. We don't need to get any closer to the wall than 2 inches. After I've done probably about a 3 by 3 surface, as you can see, I've done 3 by 3. You want to cross roll it. I'm going to go back now, and I'm going to start 2 inches from the wall, and I'm going to roll back with a dry roller, and I'm going to make sure that I go over the same 3 by 3 foot patch. Now we're going to go for, now it's important this next stage when we're rolling a ceiling. So I've got one section done of my 3 by 3 section. I go back into my roller pan, I get paint on, I do the same thing. I start one width away from the wall, I go into the 3 by 3 patch that I've already done by at least halfway. If you don't go in halfway, you'll have lap marks. So I go, come back out 3 feet, get the paint off my roller, then I move it closer to the wall, and I'm doing my same thing. I'm thinking as a homeowner, I'm thinking 3 by 3, always 3 by 3. That will make sure that I have plenty of paint on my roller and that I'm not trying to dry roll my ceiling. Most homeowners make the mistake of not putting enough paint on the surface. So you want to make sure you have, if you keep a 3 by 3 section in mind, you'll always have enough paint on the surface. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to 2 inches from the wall and I'm going to dry roll, except this time I'm going to dry roll into my first patch by at least 1 roller width. Now I've got a 3 feet by 3 feet, and we're going to continue that pattern all the way down the room. The most important thing, so you don't lose track of where you're at, is to work from left to right, and then from right to left, and keep on going. If you keep that 3 foot margin always in place and always going into the other 3 foot patch, you'll never miss the same spot twice. So that's a quick little version of painting your ceiling. Remember, the key points there are never start next to the wall, always start away from the wall, always work towards the wall, 3 by 3 foot patch, always lap into the 3 foot patch, work from left to right, and then from right to left, and always lapping into the ceiling. If you do 2 coats, your ceilings will come out perfect. That being said, Shayla, how are we on time?
We are good.
Great.
We're perfect, actually.
So after our ceilings are complete, the next thing that we want to do is our trim. The reason we do our trim before we do the walls is because the trim is, in most cases, the paint that we use is shinier than the wall paint. Therefore, if we get the trim paint onto the wall, it's going to be more visible. It's going to be shinier. Usually there's a color difference between the wall paint and the trim paint. And usually the trim paint will also have a smaller edge. So this is a perfect example. This edge right here is smaller and less visible from an angle than looking straight at the wall. So we always want to paint the trim first and then the walls. Before we paint the trim, we need to understand we need to prepare the surface. Preparation, here's one. Obviously I'm going to gloss through or go quickly on a couple things, but one little trick you can have is your sandpaper. When you guys are going to sand your trim, a lot of people will take a piece of sandpaper and they don't know what to do with it. They fold it in half and then they fold it this way, and then it gets it doesn't fit in your pocket. One trick is to take a sheet of sandpaper, 9 by 12 sheet, fold it in half, tear it, fold it in quarters. Now you have a piece of sandpaper that will easily fit into your pocket. It can be used one side, second side, and then the third side, and it won't move on you. It will stay firm. So the first part of preparing any type of trim is always giving a sand, a light sand. So the light sand that we want to do, I'm just going to get lightly. I would always do one section at a time. I would prefer to have everyone do always everything at the same time, the same way. So start at the top. Notice a lot of people will over sand the surface. You really don't. A light sand, I'm going to sand the whole surface. Then I'm going to move to the one side. I don't care if you go to the right side or the left side. And I'm going to sand that. I'm going to sand my edge. Sand my inside. Then I'm going to sand the other side. Now I'm sanding this whole window because I think it's important for you to understand that depending on how smooth you want it, then I'm going to go to my windowsill. I've sanded a window. It didn't take more than a couple minutes. So you don't have to think that this sanding process is going to be really involved and I got to take this down to the bare wood. You just really need to take the sheen off the existing paint or knock any imperfections that may be on that. If there are holes in the trim or there are areas that you need to spackle, I would suggest that you use this wood filler. Wood filler is a little beige in color. It will dry quickly and it will sand easily. So if I were to take the wood filler and spackle a hole with my putty knife, it would look something like that. I would let it dry for about a half an hour, and then when it was dry, I would just lightly sand it off. After your surface has been sanded, you're going to want to clean it. If you have a vacuum, that would be great. If you don't have a vacuum, and you might have an old brush in the house, you can just simply, again, from the top, dust that surface off, or vacuum it the same way. Make sure we get the top of the window from the dust. And then
Silicon Valley.
again, we haven't made too much of a project of this. We've cleaned the surface, we've sanded it, now we've cleaned it, it's been spackled. You may want to have a caulking gun in a tube of caulking so you can caulk any open seams. You don't need to caulk everything. This window has nothing that would need to be caulked. But if there was an open seam, you would caulk it, and then you would use, again, your wet rag to wipe your caulking. That's a very important step when you're dealing with trim, is to always wipe your caulking with a wet rag. That will make a nice smooth edge, and it won't hurt your finger. So you take the wet edge of and you make sure your rag is wet, you put it on your finger, and then you would wipe your caulking, if there was caulking there. Next is the painting of the trim. So we've prepared the surface. Next thing is the painting of the trim. Now we're going to get into the brush, right? We're not going to roll our trim. We're actually going to brush our trim. So always keep your sleeve that the brush goes in. That's how you want to store your brush going into the future. Now I'm going to you can see I have this one pot. I take my liner out, put it with my sealing. I go to my trim paint, which I've labeled trim because it's similar in color. I put it in my pot. Now, here's a very important part. First, I'm going to tell you how to paint trim. I'm going to tell you how to get in and out of your pot, which is very important. If you're a professional or you want to paint like a professional, there's a few things you need to understand. Most people will dip their brush in the paint and have all this paint on, and then they'll go like this. They'll scrape it off both sides. And then they've got no paint on their brush. But then they'll go and they'll still try to paint. And they don't get the results because they don't have any paint. The second step that someone may do is they'll dip their brush in the pot, and they'll keep it all on the brush. And now they've got too much paint on the brush. So what I'm going to teach you is how to get in and out of a paint pot first. You always want to dip your brush into the pot, and then you want to tap it. You can tap both sides or one side. I would suggest starting off to tap both sides. So I'm going to tap here, and then I'm going to tap here. That gives me plenty of paint on my brush. It's not coming off, and I don't have too little. So I've patted my brush twice on each side. Now, where do I start? If you keep this in mind, you'll never go wrong. Always paint the little edge first. Always paint the big edge or the fattest portion of any surface last. So in this particular case, here's a window casing. Again, we always start at the top. So here I dip in, I tap, 1, 2, that's it. Now I'm going to start on, I could start on the fat part, but I'm going to start on the little surface first. So here's the little surface of my window, right? It's the littlest part of the window is this one little surface. That's it. I'm not going to brush it too much. Always count your strokes. When you people are starting off painting, count your strokes. 1, 2, 3, done. Don't do any more because you're taking the paint off. Don't do any less because you'll be leaving too much paint on. So now I'm going to go in again. In, tap, tap, come out. Now I'm going to do I have my little section here that I've done, right? Now I would do my upper section, and I'm going to keep my brush angled. 1, 2, 3. Done. 1, 2, 3. Now, important factor when you're painting in your brush. I taught you how to get in and out of your pot. In, tap, tap. Well, when I'm going to paint an edge, whatever edge, I don't want to get paint on. So let's say it's this edge here. I don't want to get paint on the wall. I want to get a little bit on the wall, but I don't want to get a lot on the wall. So that's when I have to determine which side of the brush am I going to use. Whatever side that is, you want to take the most paint off. So in that particular case, if I'm going to paint the side of this casing now, I'm going to go tap, tap. I'm going to start on my little edge first. I'm going to go right here. It's my littlest edge is right in here, inside. I'm going to go down. But now, okay, I can't get all the way down because it's too far. So I go in again, I tap, tap. I paint that little edge first. I got that little edge. Now I've got to get close to the edges of areas that I don't want to get paint on. I got to get close to the window, and I got to get close to the wall. So for this exercise, I'm going to say that my window is on my right side of my brush, right? I'm here, my window's on my right side of my brush. So I want to go in, and I want to tap only the right side several times. I want to get all the paint, or as much paint as I can, off of that edge that's going to be running down towards the window, keeping paint on the other edge that's going to be towards this side. If everyone is clear there, so now I've got little paint on my right, more paint on my left, and now I can strictly draw a line right next to my window, and I don't have a lot of paint on my brush, therefore I don't have to worry about pushing a wave. So a professional would call too much paint on their brush pushing a wave. So a homeowner gets up there and they're pushing this wave, and it's going up and down and up and down, where if you have a nice dry edge, you can draw a line closer to the surface that you don't want to get paint on. So again, if I was doing this side of the casing, I would go in, I would tap, tap on my pot, tap, tap. Except now I know that if I go in, I want to have less paint on the left side of my brush because it's going towards the wall than the right side of my brush that's going towards the casing. So now I'm going to switch hands because it's a little easier for me. Now I'm going to start up here and I'm going to go right down the edge. Notice I'm getting plenty of paint on the wall. I don't really care about that because I'm going to paint these walls. I actually want to get paint on the wall. I want to get at least a ½ inch of paint on the wall. So I'm going to come right down the edge. I'm going to hit that edge. I'm going to come back up. And now I've hit both my little edges. Both little edges have been painted now, here and here. I got paint on my wall. I have no paint on my casing, on my window. Now I'm going to go back in to paint the face of my trim. That's the biggest part, right? So little edge, now the face, and this will hold true with whatever you're painting. Baseboard, door casings, window casings, even doors. I go in, I go tap, tap. Now I'm not double tapping on one side to get rid of most of the paint. I'm keeping it even, and I want to start on my casing, and I don't want to go flat like this. I want to angle my brush so it never comes outside the frame of the casing, right? So I go 1, 2, 3. See, I only got about a 2-foot section. Go back in my pot, 1, 2, back on, come down lower than you were before, midway down. Don't start where you ended. Start at the top, come down, wherever that last brush stroke is, you want to start about 6 inches below that. Get the excess off your brush, keep your brush angled, come up into what you painted, go back down, and then finish it off with 1 stroke from top to bottom, and that will give you a sufficient coverage for 1 coat. I would suggest that everyone does 2 coats on everything. Don't try to get away with 1 coat coverage because it's very easy to miss a spot, but it's very hard to miss the same spot twice. So if you do that 1 coat, done. Don't overbrush it. Don't go back to it. If there's a sag, we'll come back another day and we'll sand it. If you missed the spot, we'll come back another day and put another coat on. So there we've got into painting the trim, little edge to the big edge. And that would hold true if Shayla, you put it over this door. If I were to paint a door, I would do it the same way. I would start at the top and I would paint the little edge first. I would keep the paint off of the edge near the glass. And I would do all my tops first. And then I would do the next little edge and the next little edge. So if you go online, you can see how to paint a door. If you've got doors, that's a class of its own on how to paint doors. Usually you start at the top, and if it's a panel door, you do panel, 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 and then you do the stiles. And you do the stiles, top, bottom, and then the sides. So if you go online, it'll show you how to paint a door, but always remember if you paint the little edge first, you'll never go wrong. So when you're painting a panel door, there's a little edge on that panel. You paint that little panel, that little edge first. Then you paint the face. So little edge to the biggest. So now the trim is going to be the most challenging for you. But again, tackle things in sequence and they'll be easy. So now you've got your ceilings are done, your walls are done, and now it's going to be, your trim is done, excuse me. And now it's going to be time to tackle your walls. Preparation, you've noticed I kept this picture on the wall because if you want the pictures to go up in the same spot, you simply take your pictures down, leave your picture hook in the wall, but then you realize, oh, well, I remember when I was trying to hang that picture, it took me several attempts to get it in the center of the wall. You know, I have all these holes, but you're going to leave that one picture hook in the wall. Then you're going to spackle any other holes. So you put your spackle on the holes around the picture hook. You'd let that dry for 30 minutes. Some people could say that you could prepare the whole room before you start painting. I tell you to tackle things in stages. Ceiling first, all your trim second, all your walls and every aspect of the walls last. So now that we've got we've sanded up our sandpaper the same way, we've spackled our walls, we want to give our walls a light sand. Not really important to as you can see, I'm going to give this a quick sand. I've taken all my switch plates off. I'm going to get to the switch plates in a second. Here's a switch plate that I did not take off by design. So if homeowners are home and they say, well, okay, I take all my switch plates off, but this one's got a timer on it, and you might have something like this at your house. Leave it on. We can always use tape to tape around it. So don't make anything more challenging than it needs to be. So I give it a light sand. I sand the wall. As you can see, I really don't need to sand much more than I just did on this one wall. So I just sanded this, let's say, 8-foot by 4-foot section in less than a minute. Now, my walls, I'm going to say, have been sanded. They've been spackled and they've been sanded. Again, I'd want to go back to this, either a vacuum or a dust brush, and I'd want to go ahead and either dust off the surface where the dust could have landed. Get rid of this picture. I want to get rid of the dust off of any surfaces that it could have landed on. I want to make sure my wall is nice and dry and clean and dust-free. You can certainly use a vacuum if you'd like, but in most cases it's not necessary.
Perfect on timing.
As far as the walls are concerned, before we get into the walls, we have to make sure that we prepared everything. After we prepare everything, now we're going to use our yellow tape. So here's where your paint job is either going to look like your neighbor did it or a professional did it. So here we're going to take this yellow tape, and as you remember here, I got plenty of wall paint on trim paint on my wall. Now I'm going to go over to my casing. I don't necessarily have to tape off the top of the casing, but I will, and I'm going to show you why, but I'm going to start right here first. I'm going to just put it, maybe Shayla, you can go on this side. Now you can put that roll of tape right next to the wall, just like that. Take your finger and roll it right down the edge. Now, I don't care if a little gets on the wall or not. It's not important. What's important is that you have used tape and you're taking your finger and making sure it's nice and tight all the way down. Again, put my tape right against the wall. I know it's going to be nice and tight. I'm going to rub my finger on it. Again, all the way down. If you mess up, pull it off and do it again. Now, you can either break the tape before you go across your baseboard, or you can continue to run it. I would suggest to break it. Now I'm going to tape my baseboard. Again, same thing. I'm going to rest it against the wall. I'm going to simply push down with my thumb to make sure the tape is nice and straight. The difference between tape and no tape is that your cut line will be sharp and crisp. So I'm going to take these two areas off like this. And then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to now, I just painted this, so this is not going to be ready for taping. But we would tape all the way around the window casing. So, again, I keep my tape flush to the wall, so I'm nice and tight. and then I come up and around. It's okay if your tape gets on the trim. It's okay if your tape gets on the wall, as long as it's in a straight line. That's why, again, we lift the trim paint onto the wall. So now I've got everything. I'm going to just do the top of this window so I can show everybody why we do that.
He's back up.
Okay, so the top of that window is also masked. So now I'm going to get into my wall paint. Again, going very quickly, but the tricks to learn here is whiz rollers, sanding, how little you have to sand, and where to start. So now, as far as the walls are concerned, I've done all my trim. Now I'm on my walls. We're only going to ask that you use a brush for your walls at the ceiling line. So here, for purposes of this, I'm going to use a new brush. I'm going to take out my trim paint. I'm going to insert my wall paint. And you'll notice my wall paint has a tray and a whiz roller, but I'm also going to use a brush. Now this is where it may be a little bit more complicated, and I might suggest that you don't include your whiz roller or your tray until you're ready to do the second phase. You want to cut your ceiling line in first with your brush, and then the second phase will be to use the whiz roller and the tray. So now phase one is I've got my pot, my wall paint is in my pot. Everything is going to be the same. I'm going to put my brush in. I'm going to tap twice, 1, 2. It's a brand new brush, so I want to get a lot of paint on there. But now this is where you're going to learn how to brush. Again, it's very similar to the trim, except we have no little edge. So, but we do have an edge where we don't want to get paint onto. That's the ceiling. So you have to determine which way you're going to start. So if I'm going to start in this corner and I'm going to work towards you, I'm going to go up. Now we're going to take a look at my brush. I've gone in, I've tapped. Now I'm going to say, okay, which edge of this, it's got paint on both sides, equal parts. Which edge is going to go closer to that ceiling? Well, I'm going to say that I'm going to brush this way, so the left side of my brush, the side facing you, should have less paint on it. I don't want to push a wave, therefore I'm going to go in and I'm going to tap that side a couple more times to get most of the paint off the side that's going to be facing the ceiling. Then I want to go in, and right before I start to paint, I want to be about 3 inches away from the edge of the wall and about 1 inch away from the ceiling line, and I want to simply go one more time to get the paint off of that side of the brush, and then I want to go back up and I want to draw a nice line and let my bristles follow the ceiling line. Everybody, a great exercise at home for you guys to understand that faster is better is to get a piece of paper out with a black magic marker and try to draw a line, as a straight line, as slow as you can. And then try to take the same marker and draw a line, a straight line, as fast as you can. And see which one comes out nicer. The black line, as fast as you can, is going to come out nice and straight and square and nice, and it's going to come out great. Now, it might go on to a surface that you don't want, but it's going to be a nice straight line. That's why we're going to take the paint off of the edge that goes closest to the ceiling, and we're going to draw a nice straight line as fast as we can. So again, I'm going to go in, tap, tap, double tap on that one side. I'm going to go back up. I'm going to once more with that left side, get any paint off of that side of my brush, and then I'm gonna go back into 3 inches into where I already painted, and I'm gonna draw a nice line. And I'm gonna come back and pick up my excess, and I'm gonna brush it out. 1, 2, 3, right? I'm not up there forever. I'm gonna go back in, 1, tap, tap, double tap on the side that goes closest to the ceiling, take the side that goes closest to the ceiling, go a couple inches away from where I last left off, get any excess paint off the side closest to the ceiling, go back up to the ceiling line, draw a nice straight line, come back, pick up the excess, get off your brush, 1, 2, 3. Again, it's in your pot, tap, tap, double tap on the side closest to the ceiling, get the excess off the side closest to the ceiling, go back into where you painted, draw a nice straight line, come back, pick up the excess, 1, 2, 3. So it's a, if you're gonna do multiple rooms in your house, or you're gonna do one room in your house, you can simply do ceilings 1 coat, go as fast as you can, walls, but you've got to learn how to use your brush, because if that's the difference, right? People are usually afraid to get paint on a surface they don't want to get it on. So if you always remember when you're painting trim, little edge first, and you're painting ceilings and walls, then you would imagine to keep that little paint, little strokes, right? Paint off the edge you don't want to, and then nice fast line. And first, I'm going to show you one last thing. In my pot, 1, 2, double tap that, go back up. Now, if I weren't to get the paint off again, and I go right up to the ceiling line, up, now, and I go like this, I'm pushing that wave and I'm going nice and slow. That's the difference between getting the paint off and then drawing a nice sharp line. You're coming back again. It doesn't have to cover in 1 coat. You're gonna come back again, so don't try to cover in 1 coat and don't push a wave. So there we've cut in the ceiling line. That's the last you'll need of the brush. Well, maybe not, depending on if you have any runs, but we're gonna take that brush, we're gonna put it off to the side. Now we're gonna get back into our whiz roller setup with our tray for cutting in the remaining of the walls. So now, the tape, I've taped my top of my casing, I've taped my side of my casings, I've taped my baseboard. Now I'm gonna simply go into my roller, get as much paint on my whiz roller as possible. I'm gonna come back up to this casing, and I'm just gonna roll my edge. Oh boy, I forgot, I gotta take that off, right? Because I don't want to take it off. I don't want to panic. Just want to get my yellow tape and pretend I'm wrapping a nice little present here and put it around like this. Again, if I get a little on the wall, I'm not really worried. If I mess it up, I'm not really worried. I just want to make sure that I got my outside edges covered. So take that off. It's not ideal to leave a plate on, but if we have to, we have to. So now I'm going to get back into my whiz roller. And the beauty of a whiz roller is this end of it has paint on it, the very end of it. So I can take the end of it and go like this, in between a little narrow edge. Then I can flip it back down, and I can go all the way around my outlet. All the way, and then I can go back down my casing. And now I'm going to go onto my wall where my baseboard is. See, I'm getting plenty of paint on that tape. I don't really care because I'm using the right tape. So now I've cut in around my door or my baseboard. Now I'm going to go around my outlet. And then last but not least, my whole window would be taped off, and I would go around my window. Now, this side would be taped off. I go around this side. When you get to the top of your window casing, use your whiz roller and do the whole top. So now the top of my window has been rolled around all my door casing and window casings, and baseboard has been rolled. That's to take in place of cutting in with a brush. You can see how quick it happens. It goes very quickly. Now I've gotten done cutting in the wall. Now it's time to roll the wall. So Shayla, how am I doing on time?
It's 10:53.
All right.
Good.
So as far as I have, again, you'll see that I have a liner. I had my paint all set up. For the purposes of using one roller, I'm going to go right into my wall paint. I'm going to use an extension pole, just so everyone can see how to use an extension pole when you're rolling. You want to use the roller with the arm going from left to right. You want to use your arm going away. You always want your open edge of your roller to be closest to the edge of the surface, like a casing, right? So again, it's similar to rolling the ceiling, except we're going to use a little different technique. The ceiling, we used a cross-check section. We did 3 feet straight, and then we went across. When we do a wall, we're going to use either a J stroke or a W stroke. Now, I can't do a J if I'm this close to the trim. Again, remember some reoccurring themes here. We don't want to put paint on too close to a surface that we don't want to get the paint on. Same thing with a wall. So I'm going to start a good roller distance away from the trim. I'm going to start from the top down. I want to be somewhere about 6 inches from the top of the ceiling and 1 roller from the outside. I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to do a nice J. I'm going to come down, and I'm going to make a J. Everybody see the J I just made? Now, I'm going to go back with the same roller after I do that J, and I'm going to pick it up below my J. I'm going to roll back up to the top, 1 inch from the ceiling, come back down, then I'm going to do almost a little W, come back up, and then come back down. So what I've done is I've done a J with a W. I'm going to do 1 more stroke so you guys can get the idea of this. I come in, I start about 1 roller width away from the wall. I come down, I J back up. Now I want to come back down. I want to go back up to my pattern that I was in. I want to go about 6 inches into it. Then I want to come back down, W it here, and then go all the way up, and then come all the way back down. That's when you're rolling back over your surface. So now I've gotten 2 of those. I'm using plenty of paint. I come back down, I J it, 1, 2. I come back up, I meet where I left off, come back down, W it, there we go, right? Now I'm going to come back up, back down. So when I get the whole section done, now there's a little section, I probably could have squeezed that out. J, up, down. Now I've gotten from the top of the ceiling down 2 feet out. Now I'm just going to go back and make sure I'm just going to run it right over it. And I'm going to start the next one. Here's my second course. 6 inches down from the ceiling, 1 roller over from where I left off. I'm going to come down in J, then I'm going to come back over, go all the way up, W it, then I'm going to come down and do it again, Then I'm gonna pick it up. I'm gonna do it again, J, pick it back up, W it, and then when I get this whole section done, I'm gonna overlap my roller. I'm gonna go up, I'm gonna go down, I'm gonna make sure I get nice, no misses. Now when I get close to this window, I'm gonna flip my roller around. So this edge of my roller is going towards the trim. Working yourself all the way across, left to right. Again, use plenty of paint with your roller. If you find yourself pressing against the roller and using your shoulders, you're not using enough paint. You should never have to roll. When we teach our professionals to roll, it's never with more than 2 or 3 fingers on a roller pole. That will keep pressure off of the roller pole and off the roller, decreasing your lines that your roller makes and increasing how fast you can go.
So you might want to talk to them about, really quickly, about how to take the tape off. Do you need to strike it at all?
I can. So ultimately, you can leave this tape on for the 2 days or 3 days max that you're going to take to paint your walls. If you're in a situation where your room is way too big, the last word of advice I will give you is do one wall at a time. Don't make the project any harder than it needs to be. If I had a huge house, I would do one wall at a time. That's going to give you encouragement to do another wall. So get your ceiling done, then do the window casing or 2 window casings on that wall, or the 3 windows or doors or whatever's on that one wall. Take that one wall off, paint that one wall, and be done with it. Now, when you're done with the wall, you're done with your trim, and you want to take your tape off, it's important for you to understand that we just don't want to pull it this way. We want to pull it towards, away from the casing. So it's almost like pulling as sharp of a line as possible. So I'm not on this side pulling it off. I'm on this side pulling it off. And I pull this trim as tight as possible. And again, I don't want to be here pulling it. I want to be here pulling it. I would encourage everybody to pull your tape no longer than 1 day after the paint is dry. You can pull it off sooner if you'd like, but no sooner than 2 hours after the wall's been, you want that wall to be tacked up. So that being said, hopefully you guys have learned a few secrets and tricks of how to paint a room. It's never easy to show somebody how to paint a room in an hour, but we gave it a shot in these trying times that we're in. If anybody ever has any questions or would like to reach out to me for further consultation, Joe, all you gotta do is call my office, tell them that you were part of the DIY class, and they will put me in contact with you, and I'd be happy to go into any type of detail that you need. And if you haven't been sick of hearing from me by now, I'm also on the Handyman Hotline today on 95.1, where you can hear more of some horror stories of people trying to do stuff, and maybe we can straighten it out. Or sometimes people call in with some great suggestions on how to do stuff. So please, thank you very much for joining the class. I hope I was some help for you today. And everybody, good luck with your projects.
Very good. Thanks so much, Sheldon and Shayla. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a nice day.
Have a great day.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye now.